governance. I am Faith Bacon from Path Foundation Philippines, a NAPC Council member. And before we begin, let's understand who's with us today. So we again have another QR in front, but this one is for a Mentimeter to see who are joining us for this afternoon session. Please use this QR code in front again and answer the 2 questions in the Mentimeter. We encourage everyone to please participate in this poll. And in a few seconds, we will see the result. Oh, I think it says, are you representing a local, national, or international? For our international friends. I think yeah. Oh, the people in front are doing a crash course on the Mentimeter. Okay. We hope to see the results in a few seconds. There. So you can see that the results would say that 26% or 28% is going up are from the CSOs or the basic sectors. And we're so happy for that. While there are 20% from government and 6% from the private sector. Next, there. Oh, we have a lot of national people, organization joining us, a few international and many local, almost. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's go on. Today, we will hear from key leaders and practitioners who will share success stories and challenges in integrating poverty reduction with DRR. We will also have a panel discussion where esteemed experts will provide insights and recommendations for strengthening community-driven poverty reduction and DRR practices. So to kick off today's session, I'm honored to introduce Mr. Ruperto Cauper Alerosa, the Vice Chairperson for the Basic Sectors of the National Anti-Poverty Commission, who particularly comes from the fisher-folk sector representing his organization, Pambansang Katipunan ng mga Samahan na sa Kanayunan or PKSK. Please help me welcome Mr. Alerosa to deliver our keynote address.
Honorable speakers, basic sectors, guests, and partners, good afternoon. We are on a crossroad of pushing for development, but at the same time, it seems like we are also compromising the state of our environment and natural resources. We are moving. We are acting, we are preventing, preparing, and responding to the disasters. But one major concern, on top of financing DRR efforts, is localization. As a government agencies, under the office of the President, we are proud that only these agencies provides an automatic recognition for our representation, meaningful representation, and participation of the basic sector and the marginalized sectors. And I'm proud to share with you that prior to this APMC DRR, we just had a successful basic sector, NAPC basic sector pre-event, the NAPC basic sector summit on DRR last Saturday. It is in this light, in this context, that the role of the NAPC basic sector and the National Anti-Poverty Commission becomes indispensable. Our mission in NAPC is clear. We pause to elevate the voices of our poor and marginalized and ensure that they are part of the solutions and not just mere statistics. Nothing about us without us. Today's event marks an important milestone in that journey. Hopefully, we can reflect on our progress and challenges that remain while pushing for the integration of locally driven, gender responsive, and socially inclusive DRR strategies into our policies, programs, and projects. May our discussion today benefits the most vulnerable among us. And lastly, allow me to tell you this, my quote of mine, in my own language, no? Saan mang labanan, ito may kalamidad o kahirapan, sa pagkatalo'y huwag pumayag, di baling matakot, huwag lang maduwag. Maraming salamat po and mabuhay.
Let us bear in mind the key messages of Kauper. That NAPC's role is enhancing the participation of vulnerable communities in DRR. That basic sector's involvement in DRR is important, and there is a need for policy reform to institutionalize community-driven DRR solutions. Thus, he calls for greater inclusion of basic sectors in DRR governance. Thank you again, Mr. Alerosa, for that inspiring keynote message. Now, we will move on to our next segment, where we will hear from speakers who are leading the way in integrating DRR and poverty reduction. Our first speaker is Ms. Regina Nanette Salvador Antiquesa, the Executive Director of EcoWeb and the Sectoral Representative for the Victims of Disaster and Calamities in NAPC. Ms. Antiquesa, or Nanette, SR Nanette as we call her, has over 30 years experience in humanitarian development and peace-building work. Let us now welcome, and let's give her a round of applause, Ms. Nanette Antiquesa.
Thank you, Ms. Faith. Maayong hapon sa tanan. Good afternoon. Yes, team colleagues, distinguished guests, and fellow advocates, salamat. Thank you for being here. The Philippines, a country highly vulnerable to climate change, conflict, and human-induced hazards, hold the alarming distinction of being ranked #1 in the World Risk Index and has always been on the top of the list of countries. This ranking highlights a harsh reality that many Filipinos face, especially the poor and marginalized. Climate-induced disasters such as floods, typhoons, and droughts disproportionately affect these communities. These disasters push communities further into poverty, and the poor are often the first to be hit and the last to recover. This is why poverty reduction and disaster risk reduction are closely connected. You can't deal with one without addressing the other. At the heart of addressing both are the survivors in the affected communities, the basic sectors, the civil society organizations who play a pivotal role in ensuring that disaster preparedness and recovery efforts are inclusive, locally led, and responsive, making sure the most affected and vulnerable people have a say in how their communities prepare and respond to crises and disasters. In the Philippines, we have made important steps to give these key local actors a seat at the table. Through laws like the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of the Philippines in 2010, CSOs are given representation in the DRRM governance. But for the marginalized sector, it is not enough. Through the Social Reform and Poverty Alleviation Act of 1997, along with the Magna Carta of the Poor of 2019, more spaces for participation are created, especially for the 14 basic sectors, including persons with disability, senior citizen, children, youth, women, indigenous people, farmers, fisherfolks, urban poor, women in the informal sector, workers in the informal sector, labor and migrant workers, cooperative, NGOs, and even the victims of disaster and calamities. They are enabled to participate more in policy making and government processes. These laws are strong foundation, I could say, but still not enough. To strengthen further the representation and participation of the 14 basic sectors in DRRM governance, the 14 basic sectors, through the leadership of the Victims of Disaster and Calamity Sectoral Council, collaborating through the platform provided by the National Anti-Poverty Commission, we relentlessly pushed for the institutionalized mechanism of not only including but supporting the meaningful participation of the basic sectors in the DRRM Council at all levels of the government. In 2022, I'm proud to say the NDRRMC Memorandum Order number 7 was issued. Because of this push, to ensure that the basic sectors are represented in the DRRM councils at all levels. And this was a major win, for the sectors. But I tell you, it took some time. And even to make this, having this operationalization, having these guidelines. Hence, the finalization and adoption of the NAPC operational guidelines for the basic sector's representation in the local, regional, and national DRRM councils, finally signed after 2 years of hard work, is worth celebrating. For it means, and of course, thank you, Secretary Pino, really for supporting that. And of course, it means we could expect to see more impactful influencing on local DRRM, the local budgeting, programming, budgeting, monitoring, through organized representation in the DRRM councils in 18 regions, 87 provinces, 149 cities, 1,489 municipalities, 42,045 barangays in the coming years. And that's our dream. But securing representation is just the first step. To make a real impact, these representatives need support, including training and resources to make sure they can influence local DRRM plans, budgeting, implementation, monitoring, and feedbacking to ensure communities are made truly at the center of the DRRM and climate change adaptation, governance, and management. Achieving the policy changes we have shared today actually really took years, and it shows that transforming structures that keep people vulnerable takes time, and it takes resources and persistent advocacy. The recent Philippine Basic Sectors and CSO DRRM Summit, we just held actually days ago through the NAPC platform, shows that it is like a powerful reminder of what can be done when local actors and communities take the lead. Actually in that summit, many innovative, gender-sensitive, and socially inclusive solutions were shared. One of the good practices that we have shared in that summit will be shared by our next speaker. With an evidence materials, we have actually distributed a material for you to read after. So I hope you will have time to read all those learning materials shared. And hearing from the various sessions actually in this APM-CDRR conference, indeed we can say we are not short of good practices. It's already working on the ground where communities and local actors are already demonstrated their capacity that they can really do more as partners in ensuring DRRM and climate change adaptation work for the poor and vulnerable. These are proof that locally led initiatives, and there are already successful models for this. What we lack is not ideas, but funding and resources to bring these good practices to more communities. As we face growing risks due to climate change, we also call for climate justice. Governments, businesses, and financial institutions must take responsibility for their role in the crisis and fulfill their commitments to support the most vulnerable. This has been emphasized in the Philippine Basic Sectors and CSO statement for the APM-CDRR, a copy of which we have also distributed to everyone here. I hope you have time to read those. In conclusion, while we've made great strides in policy advocacy, we must ensure these policies translate into meaningful change in the lives of the poor and vulnerable. We need to keep working together across local, national, and international levels to make sure disaster risks are reduced, poverty is lessened, and the voices of the marginalized are heard and empowered. As the internally displaced persons like in Marawi, yes, also Kaoper mentioned, nothing about us without us. So no one vulnerable and marginalized can be left behind. Let us continue in this important journey of building together a future that is safe, secured, and ensure dignity of all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Antiquesa, for those valuable insights. From the advocacy of the basic sectors and their engagement with the government, now we will hear example of results of engagements and collaboration between civil society and the local government unit. At this juncture, I'm honored to introduce to you our second speaker. At the age of 26, amazingly, she became the youngest mayor of Las Nieves, Agusan del Norte. She's finishing up her first term and gunning for a next term. Her leadership aims to foster inclusive growth and promote sustainable peace and development and enhance disaster response and preparedness by partnering with local and international stakeholders through collective efforts. Please help me welcome Mayor Karen Rosales of Las Nieves.
To the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and Head of UNDRR, H.E. Kamal Kishore, the National Anti-Poverty Commission Lead Convener, Secretary Lope B. Santos III, distinguished guests, fellow colleagues in government, delegates from the Asia-Pacific region, good afternoon, maayong hapon kanatong tanan. In December 2023 till February of 2024, climate-induced disaster struck areas in Mindanao with flooding caused by a shear line and low-pressure areas, affecting over 481,000 families. The municipality of Las Nieves in Agusan del Norte was among the hardest hit areas, displacing over 14,000 of our residents and severely damaging livelihoods in agriculture and fisheries. Vulnerable groups, especially women, were disproportionately affected, facing heightened risks and challenges during and after the disaster. While traditional relief efforts from the local and national government provided immediate aid, they were insufficient to foster long-term recovery. This is where our partnership with civil society organizations like EcoWeb has made a difference by integrating the survivor and community-led crisis response approach into our actions in an effort to rehabilitate the affected communities. In just 4 months, through microgrant support, The community groups were able to implement and operationalize their initiatives, reaching a total of 29 groups or 38,293 individuals. These diverse groups included farmers, persons with disabilities, youth, women, and many other sectors, demonstrating the inclusive approach of the process. The majority of community initiatives were livelihood projects, followed by disaster preparedness by acquiring and also included support for education of children and community service infrastructure improvement projects. This slide shows some of the microgrants project implemented by the community, such as the liquid soap productions produced by a group of persons with disabilities, the water system upgrading of Paawasa, the corn kits of Maliko farmers, the fiber boats of Carancho, fish cage of Fisher Folks Group, and the fish processing of Women Group, among others. This locally led approach has brought out the best in these recipient communities, particularly in terms of disaster resilience and in gender inclusivity. One prime example is the Barangay Ambacon's Women's Association mushroom production. With their household income primarily dependent on agriculture, the women of Barangay Ambacon are no strangers to economic struggle in times of calamities. Most of these women are homemakers with family income dependent on their husbands, who are mainly farmers. However, when the SCLR approach was brought to the community of Barangay Ambacon, the Women's Association used their microgrant to start a mushroom production enterprise. This initiative not only provided a steady income for its members, but also brought women who were previously confined to domestic roles into the economic sphere. The project fostered collaboration among the women, building a sense of solidarity, trust, and shared purpose, which is essential in building collective resilience for future crises. Another example is the Persons with Disabilities Self-Help Group in Barangay Lingayaw, where a female member actively takes charge. Once felt helpless, especially during disasters, these individuals' lives took a transformative turn. They no longer saw themselves as dependent, but as empowered contributors to their families and the society. Not only did they capacitate themselves to take charge of their own recovery in times of disaster, they are now able to help other people during crisis as well by donating out of their initiatives fund. This change was catalyzed by the opportunity to earn sustainable income through the microgrants. Furthermore, water and food security has also significantly improved through the microgrants. Prior to this support, many communities in Las Nieves still faces serious difficulties in securing clean water and consistent food sources, especially in times of disaster. A great example is the Pinanaan Paawasa Livelihood Association, which utilized their grant to enhance their barangay's water system. This upgraded system has adequately increased water supply, serving more households, especially in times of crisis, greatly benefiting the community's overall quality of life. Farmers too saw substantial improvements. Self-help groups in the communities like Lingayaw and Pinanaan used their microgrants to acquire corn kits, which shortened their harvest times and reduced losses during flooding. The same farmers reported that tasks that usually took 5 days of manual work can now be done in just 3 hours using the same equipment. This did not only strengthen their livelihoods, but also provided a more dependable food supply for their communities. The experience of Las Nieves on the shear line and LPA-induced flooding has underscored the transformative impact of the survivor and community-led crisis response approach among our communities, particularly with the vulnerable sectors. These initiatives didn't just rebuild livelihoods, they transformed gender dynamics, empowering women and marginalized groups to take on leadership roles, collaborate, and strengthen their communities. This demonstrates the power of locally led initiatives in building economic development and in resilience. Moreover, disaster management framework in the local government is guided on four key pillars: disaster prevention and mitigation, disaster preparedness, disaster response, and disaster rehabilitation and recovery. However, for local government units like Las Nieves, disaster rehabilitation and recovery efforts are limited due to constraints in our local sources. Such funding poses significant challenges to our ability to effectively support communities during recovery phase. Our partnerships with civil society organizations underscore the importance of collaborative efforts between government and the private sector in building a disaster-resilient region. To scale up the survivor and community-led response approach, we must integrate it into local, national, and international disaster risk reduction frameworks. By institutionalizing the SCLR approach in policies and strategies, we can empower communities to lead their own recovery. This includes providing local training, flexible funding, and ensuring community involvement in planning and decision-making. The key to enabling faster action, better resource sharing, and more support for the vulnerable groups is by strengthening partnerships like those between civil society organizations like EcoWeb, the local government units, and the community volunteers. By creating spaces for continuous knowledge exchange like sharing the best practices, we can amplify the impact of the SCLR approach across disaster-affected areas, not just in the Philippines, but across the Asia-Pacific regions. Thank you, and once again, good afternoon. It has been an honor to speak in behalf of the people of Las Nieves.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rosales. Truly, partnership between LGUs, CSOs, and communities, especially the vulnerable sectors, is essential in building resilience. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our final presenter. She is a civil society leader from Asia who will provide insights on linking poverty reduction with DRR in the broader regional context. Samira Nori is the EIE Manager and Deputy Director General of the Citizens Organization for Advocacy and Resilience from Afghanistan. She will be coming to us straight from her home country through the wonders of technology. Welcome, Samira. Samira, please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And good afternoon. I'm Samira Nuri, and I'm online from Afghanistan. It's a pleasure to be here to share some of the good practices of co-organization that have been done during the years. So,
Samira, we're having a little bit of a technical problem for a while. We can't hear you, but we can see you. Hi.
Can you hear me?
So we're doing something about it.
Hello.
Hi there. While we're, yes, there she is. Oh, that's me. That's my voice. Yeah, that's not yet Samira. Okay. While we're waiting for Samira to join us or the technical problem to be resolved, we will be passing around the QR code for the registration. So, so that we could get a sense of everyone who's attending this session. And for those who are just coming in, this is the session on poverty reduction and DRR, sponsored by the National Anti-Poverty Commission, Sectoral Council on Victims of Disaster and Calamities. Welcome, everyone. Okay, are we ready now for Samira Nuri? So this is what the Zoom looks like now. Everyone.
Hello. Hi, everyone. If anyone can hear me. Hello. Can you hear me? Can you share the presentation? Because I'm not able to share. Thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time. This is the technology issue, so I'm Samira Nuri, and thank you for giving me the chance to provide some of the good practices of a co-organization to highlight that really some of the good projects really the reduction of poverty could contribute to the reduction of risk of any disaster. Next slide, please. We have some of the good projects like TUP targeting ultra poor and also peril, reach, and climate smart agriculture. Next slide, please. Next slide. Before going to share some of the good practices, I would like to share some of the background information of the core organization. Core organization is a national NGO and established in 1989 and working in Afghanistan since then in both development and humanitarian area. And the DRR approach is to integrate the community and decision making and also to empower the community and build the resilience and for collaboration. And the key DRR activities and achievement within core organization since 35 years of working in Afghanistan, like we have implemented more than 500 DRR projects in the country. And the main point in all the projects, we wanted to involve the community in decision making. Also, we have done some of the infrastructure development, education awareness program, like training sessions on the disaster preparedness, emergency response, and also distributing education material, and we are doing these under the CBDRM program. And also the emergency response, definitely from past few years, we are more engaged in only response program, like delivering essential service to disaster affected population through cash for work. Next slide, please. The flagship projects that I mentioned is the targeting ultra poor, peril, reach, and smart climate agriculture programs that we have done. And these were the good practices because these are the projects that we implemented for 3 years in area that we targeted the ultra poor and lifted like around 7,000 households from extreme poverty through asset transform and resilience building. And the role in DRR for this project was to strengthen the household resilience to the economic shocks and reduce the vulnerability. And also the other project that funded by UNDP was the climate smart agriculture promoting resilience in rural area and focusing on marginalized community. And also the smart climate smart agriculture, the objective of this project was to increase the productivity and build the resilience and also reduce the greenhouse gas emission. And the impact was to strengthen the livelihood and reduce the disaster risk through climate adaptation. These were the 4 projects that we implemented. We have implemented number of the projects, but these were the projects that were a bit for the longer time, and it was like the outcome was also good. Even these projects implemented 3 to 2 years back, but still when we are doing the post monitoring and we are communicating with community, so day by day they are building their capacity and the resilience is there, and that resilience really contribute to reduce the risk of any disaster. So that's why we are more focusing that how to reduce the poverty that could build the resilience of the community so they will be able to cope with any disaster and they can be resilient and for the sustain for these all. Next slide, please. So for the conclusion, like we want, this is the suggestion of core organization or maybe some other organization as well that they have done such program like TUP, PIRL, and CSA to demonstrate how addressing disaster risk also reduce the poverty. And for the future outlook, like we would like and request the donor communities to expand climate adaptive solution and also to further empowering the community and also deepen our impact on poverty reduction in Afghanistan, not only Afghanistan, but all the Asian countries that are prone to disaster. So definitely like reduction of poverty through these programs can contribute to risk or mitigate any risk of disaster. Thank you so much. If there's any question, I'm available. And if there is any need for the report or success story, definitely I will be sharing that all. Thank you.
Now we will go to our panel. They will be joined, the 2 speakers will be joined by our panel. Let me introduce the panels, please. Our first panelist is Dr. Puji Pugiono. Puji is a well-known CSO leader in Southeast Asia. He is the senior advisor to the Pugiono Center and founder of the Indonesian Development Humanitarian Alliance. He is the president of the Indonesian Association of Social Workers and member of the steering committee for the Global Social Service Workforce Alliance. He will be joined by Ms. Manya Vidic. Manya has been with the United Nations for over 12 years, focusing on humanitarian coordination, strategic planning, and climate change issues. Since 2021, she has served as head of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, or OCHA, in the Philippines, where she also worked as deputy head starting in 2019. Manya has worked in various parts of the world on humanitarian coordination and private sector partnerships. Welcome. Thank you. Right? Yeah. I've been asked to sit with them. Now this is our panel. Welcome everyone. And so we will start with the discussion with a question for Dr. Puji. Okay. As a prominent advocate for localization in disaster response, particularly through your leadership roles in ASEAN and the Global South, what do you believe are the key enablers that allow local actors, especially in developing countries, to take the lead in disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation?
Thank you. That's a $6 million question. Well, ladies and gentlemen and Secretary, good afternoon. It's an honor and pleasure for me to be here among you. All the good words has been said, the right language is by all the speakers. I'm going to tell you what the problem is. Okay? Have you ever wondered that President Cory Aquino kicked off the anti-poverty program when I was only 20 years old?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
We wonder.
What has changed? Poverty eradication has become our business. We live with it. Until when? That's a question that is pertinent to all of us. But that led me to this. Given all of these basic sectors already represented and so on, Philippines is a showcase actually. Many of your colleagues in Southeast Asia hardly have any representation. So we look towards the Philippines, for example, right? But still, what are the challenges in front of you? That was the question. I would say I'm looking from the global perspective and regional perspective. One thing is true. Those yielding power are reluctant to give away their power. And that's parts that make us remain poor. Okay? Many of those are asking for reform, but they refuse to change. Right?
Yes, yes.
So as much as those people holding power are making commitment left and right, including at the global level, we're having a hard time to see the real change on the ground. As much as they promise they're going to pass on the resources to you and to me, we have a hard time to see the resources actually shifted. All right? So that's the reluctance to relegate power. That's being said though. So then what's left to us? Look, your colleagues and my people living in the foot of the volcanic mountain or the floodplain or the urban fire risk, not by intention or by choice.
Yes.
Have you ever have a baby and oh, I wish one day you will live as an urban poor? You never say that. These people live by force that, imposed upon us, right? So that's being said, the connection between the poverty and disaster risk is very clear. Part of the vulnerability that make them hit by disaster over and over again is because they are poor. That's the underlying resources that are required to be resilient. It's simply not there. Bring me to the third point and my final point for this round. Hoping for that change from the top is like waiting for the stone to float. You and I need to organize ourselves, and you're on the right path already with your urban basic sector. In other countries, we need to organize ourselves. Civil society, we need to organize ourselves and empower ourselves and not to wait until the holder of the power give it to us, because that is waiting for the stone to float, and that will never happen. That's my last answer.
Thank you, Dr. Puji. But then, how can our international organizations where you work on that sphere, better support these local efforts so that it cannot just be at the policy level,
Right.
but it can work at the ground level?
Let me show you where I come from. Not long ago, I was representing the whole global south, sitting at the same table with the power holders in the United Nations, the government of the North, NGOs, and the donors at the same table, at the same level, representing the global south. Okay. They have made promises, they have made commitment, and that's why I'm saying it with a careful characterization that they did not come forward with the truth shifting of power. Now your question, what are they supposed to do? First and foremost, our colleague from the north would need to respect us, treat us with dignity. That's the key. As long as colleagues from the north see themselves, their knowledge, their frame of reference is the valid one, and ours are deficient, this thing will never change. So the first starting point is that respect and dignity. Number two, sustain commitment. Never believe any boyfriend or girlfriend that says, I love you for today. You need to see that love translated into whether he bring money to you or not. Okay. Whether she actually waking up and, telling you in your eyes that I love you tomorrow. That life is really, so all of those promises, commitment will only true if it's sustained in reality. And number three, not only giving space, but promote the colleague from the south, the poor, and the weak to really step up into what they think are right for themselves. Giving it benefit of the doubt that they can do it and they're responsible people. We are tired to be treated as, oh, you're weak, you don't know what you're doing, our is best. Enough of that. No? Before I die, I want to see this thing change.
Okay.
And that's a long
The stone doesn't float, Dr. Puji. Okay. Thank you so much for that, Pak Puji, for those inspiring insights from an international advocate. Now we go to our UN representative, Ms. Vidic. The question is, as the head of UN OCHA in the Philippines, you are in a unique position to foster collaboration between local actors and the international community in disaster risk reduction. Now, how can UN OCHA help strengthen the capacity of local governments and communities to lead DRR efforts? You may also share UN initiatives in the country supporting the institutionalization of locally led DRR resilience and poverty reduction efforts. Yes.
Thank you. Magandang hapon. Good afternoon, friends, colleagues. It's an honor to be here, and heard already a lot of inspiring stories today. So just to complement what has been said on the importance of poverty reduction. So in the UN kind of frameworks on development, this is in the Sustainable Development Goals. The poverty reduction, end of poverty, is sustainable goal number 1. So it drives everything else that we do, including disaster risk reduction. So I think it clearly recognizes that getting this one right drives all the other sustainable development goals. So I think it's with the number 1. I think the importance is clear. I mean, the Philippines, in terms of where the Philippines is on the SDGs overall, the numbers are going down from where the country was in 2015. In 2000, around on the national level, 18% poverty rate. Now it is about 15%. And the target is 10% by 2030. So the numbers, the top level numbers are there, but of course they don't tell the whole picture.
Yes.
But if you look, these are percentages, but if you look like in absolute numbers, for the Philippines, the 15% where we are now, it means 17.5 million people. So as the population is growing, we are always, the number is more or less the same, right? It's just the population in percentages is growing. But the absolute number is 17 million people. So it's quite significant, and there's a long way to go. And as mentioned a couple of times today, it's that concept of differential risk, right? It means that if you are poor and live in a hazard-prone area, it's a very different exposure you have to hazard than if you are not poor and live in the same area. In the same way is like if you're poor in the Philippines, or if you are a relatively well-off person in Japan or somewhere, right? I mean, you're exposed to very different hazards. But even though the same typhoon are passing by. So that's on the differential risk. I think we also did not perhaps touch on those who are nearly poor. We have, even though that the statistics in the Philippines for the poor people are improving, for example, Eastern Visayas poverty level is 26%. But if you include the nearly poor, So those are people who are one typhoon away from becoming poor. The number would be around 40%. So you're coming closer to very significant portions of population. So we are looking in OCHA and together with the UN system here and our partners, how do we also make sure that those who are nearly poor don't become poor? So that's another kind of prevention strategy to complement to what was already said. And we are doing a number of activities through anticipatory action. So what we are seeing is that a lot of people these days, because the government has of course improved the DRR in saving lives significantly, we save lives with 0 casualties target, but there hasn't been any target set for protecting assets and people's livelihoods. So we do save people's lives, but then they come back from the evacuation centers with nothing left. So that then, because they have nothing left, that drives them into the poverty. And that's why they become poor. So some of the anticipatory action interventions we are doing before a typhoon strikes, we try to protect their livelihoods and their assets. And there are UN agencies who are either providing safe storage, safe shelter for the boats, for the sewing machines, for whatever livelihoods there are, so that when people come back from evacuation centers, they just take those livelihoods and can continue sustaining themselves. So that's, for example, is an example of anticipatory action interventions where we are really trying to protect the hard-won development gains that, for example, through your resilience interventions, the mushrooms, the soap making interventions, what we now need to do is that when the next typhoon comes, these assets are not lost. So that's a strategy. And the third concept perhaps is very much picking on the SCLR approach, but trying to do also this at the system-wide levels, is the flagship initiative for which the Philippines was selected as one of the 4 countries in the world, the only one in Asia Pacific, to pilot innovative bottom-up approaches and creating that flip in power, right? The decision-making really comes bottom-up, and try to test some of those approaches, and could talk, this could be a whole other session about the flagship, but we are one of the 4 countries together with Colombia, Niger, and South Sudan. And what I'm particularly proud of is that a lot of good practices coming from the Philippines are now being picked up by Colombia, Niger, and South Sudan. So these are some of the examples.
Those are great stories, Manya. But my next question would be, given all those efforts and local actors, as you say, bottom-up decision-making, what are the challenges that would be facing us as our local actors? What resources do you think would be made available for them to be able to really engage the processes coming from the bottom and going up, really?
Yeah, so I think one of the problems is that the mindset, right? It's still the mindset shift. I mean, I think the intentions are there. We've seen a lot of local government officials who are really coming forward, stepping forward. But I think overall, just if you look at the way how we plan, the way how our forms are built, the way how our administration is built, is very top down, and it doesn't really, I mean, you have to go out of your way and really put it at the forefront, the power flip to do it. But the system is not supporting you necessarily in that way. So I think it's a lot of it is just on the mindset shift and the way how decision making is still done. The other thing is, I was also mentioned, is community organizing, right? And coordination really on the level of communities. Together, of course, also with the government and the NGOs, the communities, the faith-based associations, and the communities themselves. Because only once you have the community organized or coordinated, you can really have an impact. And I think you can really sustain any hazard that comes your way.
Yeah, I think you're talking to the right people. Most of us here are basic sector organized communities. So we'll be taking questions if we do have time in a while, but let's give our panel a chance to interact with each other, maybe. Yeah. If you have questions, Puji and Manya, to our two speakers.
I have a question.
Yes.
For the speeches before now, yeah, several of the speakers said that we want to do things, but we don't have the fund. We don't have the financial resources. I think that's a lazy analysis. No? To attribute our weaknesses on the lack of money, I think it's a lazy analysis.
Okay.
I would believe that there are, like what you said, a lot of community organizing and all of those are equally important than money. But I would like to see Mayor Karen in Las Nieves. Aside from the money, were you able to mobilize your community? Like you gave example that illustrate money is not everything. Well, it's important, but it's not everything. Maybe in your
Well,
case.
Yeah, for Las Nieves, there is really no problem in organizing the CSOs in our community. We have a lot of organized groups that are waiting for programs or interventions like this. Much of the problem really lies on, as I said, on the disaster rehabilitation and recovery. As I've seen, especially in our local budget, that budget that is allocated in this aspect is very minimal, because most of the time rehabilitation and recovery is really expensive. So that's for us, for in the local government, we are calling for support in this aspect of disaster management, especially in the rehabilitation and recoveries of our communities.
Let me challenge you that. If my family were hit by disaster and I'm poor, am I waiting for the money from the government before I rebuild my house? No. I will rebuild with whatever I have. I will take the chance. I might rebuild a weaker house even, as long as I can keep my wife, my children protected from the elements. So we do not have the luxury to wait for the government money. My question to you and you, while we are waiting for the government budget to roll out in the next coming years, because it's not coming today, how do you support your people to survive in that aftermath of disasters? That will be interesting.
Okay. Sorry, I'm managing time. Can we have a one sentence answer? Please, I've been informed. We have a few minutes
Yeah.
left.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Puji. Yeah, I think he hits it on the head of the nail. In the aftermath of disaster, we know it's really the people themselves are helping themselves. The community immediately helping. And that's actually the survivor community-led crisis response approach that Mayor Karen actually has shared. And we have proven that not only in Las Nieves, but also in other communities. And I think, yeah, it's not only the resources, but of course, this bayanihan spirit, as we say in the Philippines. No, there is really that strong spirit among the community to help one another. And we also have local resources around. And if there is actually this complementary support from external, and it's really made it that we made it right, the process. I really believe upon seeing all those stories around that we do more, even with those minimal resources, as what shared by Mayor Karen already. That's why we're really advocating that whatever resources we have, even how limited, with the government or the international agencies, if we pull that together, but believe that people in the communities have the capacity, and also, as you said, really and also shift that power to them, especially in the decision-making process. Let them prioritize. I do believe that we can really do more with that ever limited resources we have. Thanks.
Thank you, Ma'am Nanette. Sorry, everybody. We really have very limited time. Would like to thank our panel, our speakers this afternoon. And we will allow them to get down and we will close this session. Thank you very much. As has been said by Puji, maybe it's not the lack of resources that's the problem, but the lack of resourcefulness. Right. Thank you. So as we wrap up, I'd like to briefly summarize some of the key takeaways for today's session. We have heard about the critical community-led solutions in DRR, the importance of inclusive governance, and the need for strong intergovernmental collaboration. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap up today's discussion, let's hear from our closing speaker, our beloved Secretary of the National Anti-Poverty Commission. Allow me to call on stage Secretary Lopez Santos III.
Thank you very much. Bapak Puji, I was 20 years old when Cory Aquino became president. the poverty incidence during that time was more than 40% in the Philippines. Poverty incidence now is 15.5%. I think we are making progress. And I would like to thank everyone from UN, Ms. Manja, of course, Mayor Karen, my colleagues in the National Anti-Poverty Commission, Ma'am Nanette and Kauper, distinguished guests, speakers, panelists, and our participants. As we conclude this very important event, I want to express my deepest gratitude for your presence and the valuable insights shared today. The importance of linking disaster risk reduction with poverty reduction has been made clear through the stories and recommendations presented. The challenges we face, worsening climate impacts, frequent disasters, and entrenched poverty require urgent responses and sustained collaboration across all sectors. Today's discussions emphasize that the poor and vulnerable are not just recipients of aid or programs, but they are crucial partners in building resilience and driving sustainable development. Their life experiences and localized solutions are essential in addressing the complexities of disaster risks. In response to recommendations from our grassroots representatives and CSOs, the government is committed to taking decisive action. And let me highlight some key priorities moving forward. Upscaling good practices through institutional support. We have seen the transformative power of locally led disaster risk reduction initiatives. These grassroots solutions, whether in preparedness, livelihoods, or governance, must be scaled up. The National Anti-Poverty Commission, working with government agencies, will institutionalize these good practices by embedding them in local and national policies and mobilizing the necessary technical and financial support to ensure that they become part of mainstream disaster and poverty reduction efforts. Second, enhancing intergovernmental and interorganizational cooperation. Effective DRR and poverty alleviation cannot happen in isolation. We must strengthen cooperation between national and local government, international organization, development partners, and private sector to ensure that aligned policies and resources will be maximized. We shall reinforce coordination mechanism to enable a local action with strong national and international support while fostering seamless governance that addresses the challenges of disasters and poverty holistically. Third, creating more inclusive and participatory platforms. We are committed to ensuring that the poor, marginalized, and vulnerable sectors have a seat at the decision-making table. The National Anti-Poverty Commission is a platform that will continue to expand guidelines for basic sector representation in all local disaster risk reduction management councils nationwide, ensuring that their voices shape national and local policies through capacity building and participatory governance. In conclusion, the government recognizes the urgency of these challenges and stands committed to working hand in hand with grassroots, civil society, and international partners. Together, we can create a future where disaster risks are reduced, poverty is alleviated, and resilience is built from the ground up. Thank you, and I look forward to our continued partnership. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you, Secretary Santos, for those inspirational words. They will truly serve as our beacon as we move forward in addressing poverty and resilience, because Poverty reduction is disaster risk reduction. And thank you to all our participants for your engagement today. Let's continue working together to build a more inclusive and resilient future for all. There will be a picture taking, only one photo op for all. We don't have time. Yes, we need to flip the power. Because Brian, QR code for the attendance. Can you have it passed around, please? Everybody come closer. Brian, QR code. Lapit po lahat dito. Kasi Mayor.